This episode of the Fishing Daily podcast is brought to you by Saltwater Marketing. Saltwater Marketing, marketing experts for commercial fishing and seafood industry in Ireland and the UK. Welcome to the Fishing Daily podcast. My name is Oliver McBride. Today I'm joined by Councillor Jim Codd, who represents the south of Wexford. And Jim's going to be talking about an incident that happened last week and how fishermen around Kilmore Quay in the south of Wexford feel about the arrest and detention of the Mary J. Jim, welcome.
Hello there, Oliver, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to bring the concerns, or more than concerns, the fear and upset that's running through the fishing community of not only Wexford but beyond to your listeners today. Thank you very much. I suppose I met with a group of skippers last Friday evening. It was an emergency meeting. I was called down earlier in the week to see this huge Navy ship looming off our coast, a ship too big to get into our harbour. They had, I understand, arrested one Irish boat. But before we even get into that, if I could point out that I spent a number of hours today speaking to young fishermen who see no hope left in their career. These are people who for generations have been seafarers, worked out of Kilmore and along that area, but now they feel that it's hopeless. And as I said to you earlier on, I'm a teacher of the last 25 years in Bridgetown, and I've taught numerous sons and daughters of the fishermen. But there seems to be very little interest to pursue it now. It seems to be dying on its feet. You know, the pride in the community, the sense of worth, the sense of value, these fishermen feel hunted at this point and are criminalized. And imagine to criminalize men and women who work so hard providing us with our food from our own waters. And you know, what happened was, the Mary J was detained. It was a 37-year-old rust bucket with four middle-aged men escorted by a heavily armed Navy boat to the harbour. And it announced itself, and I was quite shaken to hear this. It announced itself to the boat, to the Mary J's. This is the warship William Butler Yeats. Imagine the language, the warship, prepared to be boarded. These people are terrified. You know, these hard-working fishermen being dragged through the courts, given criminal records, while nations with much bigger quotas go unchecked. We seem to want to impress our European masters. The fear and anguish and mental strain on these men is huge. These are ordinary, hard-working men who know nothing of courts and certainly nothing of warships, no less. You know, we seem to want to become the processing centre for the Europeans. The minister came to Kilmore, and I discussed this with the skipper earlier on today. The minister came to Kilmore and reassured these men that he was going to fight for greater quota. There was no fight. There was no fight put up whatsoever. It was absolutely misleading. What they're doing is consigning the fishing industry to history. There's a decommissioning scheme to buy 1/3 of the fleet. And the Navy seems to be stepping it up in advance of this decommissioning scheme. And that's what I'm getting from the ordinary men on the ground. And can I say, it's very important for the listeners to bear this in mind, because I'm outraged at this. And of the 22 boat trawlers working out of Kilmore, there's only 4 that are currently fishing, because the rest of them are tied up for the month of December with that scheme. But Belgian boats are being bought and paid for in Irish waters. As everybody knows, Irish boats have already, would you believe, changed their flag, got rid of the tricolour and fished under other flags to avoid the draconian quota system that we must adhere to. I mean, there seems to be a plan to create huge processing plants. 90 million is going to be given towards processing, but at the same time, 63 million to buy out the boats. Now, I mean, there's something clearly happening. That's not for our fishing industry. If we're trying to buy out our own boats and increase the processing, we're there to serve somebody else. And it's more and more clear that's exactly what's happening. As a skipper said to me earlier on today, there's a new pier being built in Castletown Bear, he said, for the Spanish ones, and a new pier in Hoth for the Belgians. And they can see it as clear as day. We're building up our ports now for a foreign fleet, despite years of requesting an improvement to the port in Kilmore, which has 25 trawlers, between 26 or 27 lobster boats, and 8 charter boats. It's the most intensely used harbour in the country, but we'll build it for those other boats that are coming in, but not for our own. I mean, a blind man can see just how much the Irish fisherman's hands are tied. And if I could just go through some of these, but I know many of our listeners are sadly well aware of this, that the quota for monkfish currently, 59% the French have, and Ireland has 7%. Now, the problem is here, the Irish boat can fulfill this in a day or two in the month. The French are not able to fulfill the quota. They're not able to fulfill their quota, and yet we're the ones that are being arrested and brought in. This is absolutely farcical. If quota is not being used, it should be returned to a pool where those that can should. I mean, the day that boat was arrested, there was 4 Belgian boats working alongside it. No issue. Not checked. That's just monkfish. On black sole, the Belgians have 62% and Ireland has 3%. I mean, we're an island nation surrounded by water. How did we give all of this away? And why are they not shouting from the rooftops in Europe about this? In place, the Belgians have 58%, Ireland has 4%. As I say, I know your listeners know these horrific figures. Haddock, Ireland 22, France 67. Hake, Ireland 6, France 65. We cannot be expected to sustain an industry and sustain communities while we work not with one hand tied behind our back, with both hands tied behind our back, and the Navy following us at the same time. And this puts the Navy into disrepute. There's over 15,000 people in this country involved in fishing, or if not involved directly, involved around it. Yeah, and as somebody said to me today, a fishing boat is a wealth maker. And I know over the years living in this community and teaching in this community, I remember the pride of the young men bringing home their pay packets, and houses were built out of the trawlers, lives were made, children were educated. And what have we now? Now we follow them with the Navy, the couple of boats that are working. And make no mistake on this, men are prepared to go to jail. Such is the disillusion with the current government. This is at breaking point. And the skippers that I met with last Friday are very serious about this. They've had enough. And they're not going to throw in their livelihoods without taking a stand. And I think it's important to say, Oliver, before I did this interview with you, I went to meet a small farmer in an area of Clongeen down here, where the roads are impassable. This is happening across the board in rural Ireland. Our roads are left impassable. And as I said, I met another man. I met another man a month ago, a small farmer, who pointed me to the side of a hill down here where he said, when I was a young fella, he said, the local landlord gained the nickname the Leveller because he said he moved the numerous families that lived on the side of that hill out of there, and he levelled their houses. And he said the great upset that it caused his own people, thinking back about these young people his grandfather grew up with that they never saw. But you know what? Rural Ireland has been levelled again. And it's not landlords that are doing it this time. Rural Ireland is being let go to the wall. And it's clear as day. We have roads down here that you couldn't pass on. But, you know, back to the fishermen. We were let down on the Brexit negotiations. The French and I understand the French and the Dutch pushed the EU commissioner right up until Christmas Eve. The Irish had thrown in the towel by late November. And the Irish had to accept a far greater cost than any other country. We lost 15% of our quota and the French lost 4%. So you know what? Let's call it as it is. They don't care. They don't care about the fishing communities, and nobody will come out and say it. Who the hell has been fighting for us while this has all gone on? And Oliver, I have to add this staggering statistic that I'm told regularly by the fishermen, that between 40 and 50 Arctic lorry loads of fish are leaving Castletown Bear every week for Spain. And it's not being checked. They're never opened. Nobody knows what is taken out. But yet, a warship is following in a 40-year-old rust bucket into Kilmore, a warship that was too big to get into the harbour, might I add. We have men down here who are charged with landing fish in Waterford during bad weather when they couldn't get to Kilmore or Dunmore East. I mean, this shows the crazy disconnect between bureaucrats and the men and women on the ground. Imagine to be charged for trying to get in out of a storm. And meanwhile, just to highlight how ridiculous this is, meanwhile, there are Japanese and Korean boats steaming from Japan, which is a long way away, to fish bluefin tuna off the west coast. We can't catch one. We can't catch one. Did people forget to put their hand up when this was being divided? And our boys are prosecuted for going into Waterford, while Korean boats can fish off the west coast of Ireland. Look, I'm told by the skippers that the Belgians are landed in Cove and Dunleary without interference, even though they're not designated ports, despite the fact that if they go into Waterford, they're being followed. And I understand that in Spanish newspapers, Ireland has been congratulated for the use of their ports to deal with their fish. The fish, of course, that the Spanish vessels are bringing out, not the Irish ones. You know, the decommissioning of Irish boats while developing fish processing for foreign boats is absolutely shocking. So the call I'm making today is a very simple one, is to decriminalise fishermen. I find it hard to fathom how we have now made these people criminals. I met with a number of hard-working skippers that I've known all my life the other night. They didn't look to me of a criminally inclined nature at all. They looked like men who wanted to go and work, but they're being hunted. And it's time we stood up for these. You know, it seems to be it's to hell with the Irish boats. Furthermore, you know, the Belgians, I'm told, are catching between 2 and 7 ton of 2 and 7 ton of sole per week. Each ton is worth 25,000 to the board, and the Irish quota per month is 200 kilos. I mean, and we're arresting our lads. The Irish government doesn't even know what they're supposed to have. The only time the Belgians or the Spanish boats seem to be prosecuted is for some clerical error or other around how many boxes are on board or undersized fish, but overfishing they don't seem to do in Irish waters. It's only the Irish to do that. Oliver, we're looking at the demise of a rural community. We're looking at the demise of a way of life that provided for generations of people in my locality. And if we don't stand up, and if we don't take a stand and fight back, the fishing industry is no more. I think many people would already say in parts of the country it is virtually gone. This is a sad, sad day. Sad day for our country when Navy warships, and that's the terminology they use, not mine, escort Irish boats in while European boats work away beside them, taking much, much more.
It seems to be that's the problem, and we all know it, and I've said it on the podcast before. The government, the Taoiseach Micheál Martin, has not stood up once since the Trade and Cooperation Agreement and says that he stands by fishing in Ireland, stands by the fishing communities. He has constantly walked away from ever having any idea that it's in existence. And do you think maybe that your party now, representatives on the Dáil, needs to stand up and put it to Micheál Martin, and along with the other parties in the Dáil that's in opposition, stand up and put it to the Taoiseach, is he going to back fishing in Ireland?
After I met with those men in Kilmore, I had a prolonged conversation with Peadar Tóibín, and he assures me that is exactly what he will be bringing up in the Dáil. Both of us attended the rally in Dublin, where the trawlers came up the river. And you know, the sad thing about it, both of us spoke there. The sad thing about it was, it seems we might as well have been idle. I mean, I was taken by the power and the momentum of that protest that day, and I was really taken by the level of anger. And I thought this would have resulted in some, but they tell me nothing. There's been virtually no change since then. As I said that day, rural Ireland came up the Liffey to Dublin. Rural Ireland will have to take stronger actions, because we're lost. We're lost. It seems to be that our rural, our coastal marinas, you know, are there to serve purely tourism and not the natives anymore.
Going back to like the protests, do you think that we got that there was very strong momentum in June, and then July, August, September, October, November, it just dissipated, when they should have been really ramping up the pressure on their local TDs and people like that who could bring this question into the Dáil and say to the Minister for Agriculture, Food and the Marine, listen, this is your responsibility, go out and help our people.
Oh, absolutely. And I would say as well, the fishermen must unite on this. They must really demand this of their elected representatives. Those of us that are elected in these areas rely on this vote to keep us in. So take a stand, make your voice heard, and tell people who blissfully ignore the plight, and there are many, and I could name many who I've never heard anything about the fishermen spoken by them. They need to be told that we're not going to vote for you if you don't fight for us. You know, it's not so hard to put that point across to politicians, but politicians need to hear this. Fishermen need to unite, and they need to stand up against the politicians, and they need to push them, you know. And we can't just have these one-day wonders, as great as they are. There has to be relentless pressure, has to be kept on, and hopefully Peadar Tóibín raising the dial will get the ball rolling. But I mean, they've got away with hell on the rural communities, and they've got away with absolute hell with the fishing communities. Then it has to be stopped, or there will be nothing left. And as I said to you earlier on before the meeting, and if I could just finish with this, because I come from this from the perspective, as I said, of being a teacher in the community for generations, the sense of worth and the sense of value that those young people had when they were involved with their boats, involved with fishing, and they knew that they had a career path, and they were of value in the community, had a place in the community. And on the very low level of just my interaction with their children in secondary school, that counteracted a lot of the anxiety and the stress and the worry about the future that we see today. But those people were very happy. They had something to do with their lives, and they were part of an industry that valued them. It had been for generations. But it seems like the small farmer, this is all to be done with now. This is all to be done with. And they're being criminalized. And we must stand up to that. We really must stand up to that. I was taken back when I saw this 65 million euro warship looming off the horizon, not the horizon, it was quite close to the coast, of Seaview. And the cause of it was 4 middle-aged, hard-working men under arrest. So I, for one, stand with them.
Now, you said you're a teacher. Do you think that the education system in this country has a lot to do with the ignorance of people in regard to fishing and rural stuff like farming and other things that's going on? Because it seems to be that education does not, it doesn't seem to expand towards those areas of life that is important in the geography of the country. You think it's I could talk to you for hours on that. Education can be a very narrow thing, and often can be no more than a regurgitation of what your teacher told you. And once you can present it in the Leaving Cert, then you're away. It can be often no more than a memory test. Of course, and I've always went out of my way myself. I've always went out of my way to bring in those things that were important to the community, be it fishing, be it farming, be it the lifeboat. I remember hosting various tug-of-wars where farmers would pull against fishermen, and the lifeboat would come in, and we'd all pull against them. I remember being in the anchor once or twice myself, pulling against the RNLI, and unsuccessfully. But without a doubt, we should celebrate that which is of our community. We should value that which is of our community, and we should have pride in it. It seems to be we're rushing to get away from any of those things that made us who we are and what we are. But our fight now is for the fishermen. There seems to be a ramping up of pressure on them as the decommissioning looms. We cannot allow that to happen. We cannot allow them to be forced off the field. And I, for one, will be most vocal in South Wexford in standing by them. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Jim, and hopefully now we'll get the message across.
Thank you very much, Oliver, for giving me the opportunity. Thank you very much.